Hey, welcome to another episode of the Coffee Break Podcast, where our mission is to share business ideas, practices, and strategies while we enjoy our cup of coffee. Today, I'm excited to have back the two first guests that we ever had on the Coffee Break Podcast. Hey, we're the originators of the Coffee Break Podcast, and it's been quite some time since we've had the time to sit down together and record another episode. So this one is going to be called Momentum Revisited. And it's going to feature Kevan Starr and Levi Gray from our team. And we had a blast just chatting for a little while. I'm not even sure if this is going to be one episode or if it's going to be two episodes broken down. But either way, a lot of great information, insights from the way our business has changed over the past couple of years and ways that maybe you can apply change or momentum in your business. That's going to be the topic of conversation today. So grab a cup of coffee and join us for the conversation.
Got so much to say, we got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh yeah.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
How you guys doing?
Doing great.
So
fantastic.
We're jumping into a conversation here, and we're going to do one rapid fire question because normally we do 5, but we're going to do one because something different.
Yeah, sure.
Also, the topic for today is going to be Momentum Revisited. And the reason that you guys are here today, which I'm very excited about, I've been super excited about this since it showed up on the calendar, is to revisit the episode number 1 that we had back on August the 14th, 2018. Episode number 1 was Momentum, and it was the 3 of us, and we'll talk more about that in just a few seconds. But before we do, one rapid fire question for each of you. So we'll start with Kevan first. Number 1, if you could pick 3 people to be in your entourage, who would they be and why?
That's okay. So 3 people in my entourage.
This is rapid fire.
Rapid fire?
Yep.
Bradley Cooper, Steve Carell, and my wife.
Nice. I like how she was last.
All right.
If you're watching this, I love you.
Yeah. I can't believe that Chris, what's his name? The guy from...
Hemsworth?
No.
Oh, Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt. I can't believe Chris Pratt didn't make it.
I forgot.
Yeah,
I forgot.
like
We'll
take out Bradley Cooper. Take out Bradley Cooper. Put Chris Pratt in there.
Chris Pratt.
Glad you didn't say take out my wife.
Steve Carell and Cammie. There you go.
Yeah.
Good job. Okay. 3 for you. No pressure. You've had time to think about it.
Socrates.
So. Yeah, Socrates
Epstein.
for sure. Thomas Aquinas and my wife. Just because now Kevin's set the bar. So
Don't set the bar. Be the bar.
Okay, there you go. And that tells us a lot about the folks that we have on our panel today of conversation.
You're deep and full of thought, and I am ultimately vain.
Well,
And focus on humor.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
that's a more positive spin.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So let's kind of step back. Back in I don't remember when it was, and so I don't want to dive too deep in the history, but in the early part of 2018, we had a lot of conversation about starting a podcast because of a lot of conversations that we had. And I went back and listened. I think you guys did. I know Kevan did as well. I don't think Levi did any prep work. But he has been excited about being here today because he's been sitting here since he got the calendar invitation about a week ago. So anyways, we talked a lot about why we were wanting to do a podcast in episode 1. So if you haven't seen that, and maybe even magically we'll have a clip of that episode in this.
My name is Kevan Starr, and I am one of the account managers here at Loc-Doc Security, and happy to be here this morning. Kind of wedged my way in, I know. So, it's good morning.
And then at the end of the table, in the nice gray shirt, ironically.
Levi Gray. Yeah, I do customer service here, and, just anything else, pretty much. I'm kind of whatever I'm needed for, I guess. But
fill in the gaps.
I'm a gap
Jack
filler.
of all trades, master of none.
The one and only. But
That's a great new title, gap filler.
gap filler.
There you go.
Please don't put that on my business card.
Click below.
Podcast, yeah. Anyways, if you check that episode out, it was very first episode number 1, very raw. And as a matter of fact, we were all standing around the desk in the office on the absolute opposite side of this building, with one camera sitting on a stand in the corner of the room that was kind of an afterthought. And now we're sitting here in this studio with 3 cameras and a whole setup here with actual good microphones that we can all hear each other very well. Behind Kevin, we have 4 types of coffee to choose from. We have an espresso machine, we have French press, we have our new siphon brew, which we'll have to show that at some point in time on the podcast because that's pretty intense. And then we have the Chemex pour over.
Yeah.
So any of your flavor.
The one episode we should like set the siphon up like in the middle of the table and just kind of let it go while we're talking.
Well, it'll take that long.
It'll take about that long to go, but you know,
It was a while back.
It was a complicated
The dark
endeavor.
ages.
But things have obviously progressed since then. And the topic that we started out with, we said we wanted to capture some of the conversations that we had around the coffee bar in our office, and some of the conversation that we had about building business. And ultimately, I remember one of the things that we talked about is ultimately we wanted to have conversation that would impact our customers that are business owners as well. So things that are happening in our business that would be relevant to other businesses as well, and to share that with other people. And it's been a crazy ever since then, right? So here's some stats. In 2018, when we first launched, we released 20 episodes. So from August 18th or August 14th until the end of the year, we released 20 episodes that year. And then in 2019, we had a really great idea to reset the number of episodes to 1, because I thought that would be a really great idea to every year start with episode 1. And then I discovered that was a really bad idea, and I haven't been able to convince anybody to go back and relabel every single episode. So in 2019, we started again with episode 1, and we have this will be our 89th episode in that series. So combined, we're now at 109 episodes.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of talking. That's a lot of coffee.
That is a lot of coffee. So the reason that I wanted to have this conversation today is because as we're marching towards, we've already passed 2 full years of releasing an episode of podcast every week and talking about a vast variety of topics. And as the years progressed, in 2018, when we first started, a lot of the conversation was our own team. We kind of had different people on every week. And then when we moved into 2019, we started to bring other business owners in, other business leaders in, other thought leaders in. And then the conversation started to expand, which was a whole different conversation, because at that point now we're sitting around going, we're now, rather than just kind of circulating our own theories and our own thoughts, we now are injecting thoughts from outside of our organization. So that is one conversation that I want to have later on is how that's impacted us. And then 2, I want to revisit the whole momentum conversation that we had. So with that said, if for whatever reason somebody's watching this or listening to this and this is their first time and they have no idea who Kevin and Levi are, let's do just a kind of a quick summary of conversation there. So we'll start over on the far end. Give us just a quick little overview and introduction.
Sure, absolutely. Kevan Starr. I am one of the account managers here at Loc-Doc Security, and I've been here for a little over 3 years.
And I'm Levi Gray. I am the customer success manager. And started out when we did that episode, I was just the customer success representative. Since then, we've added someone to our team, Isaiah, who's been doing an awesome job. So that was I've been working here for about 4 years plus some change. So, and
in our first episode, you also introduced yourself as the customer service.
Yes. Since then, we have changed it to customer success.
Yes. And why is that? Why would we change it from service to success?
Part of what you were talking about earlier with learning from the outside, comparing ourselves to others, and kind of the customer service thing was something that was determined. That's what we all do already. That's what everyone in the company should be doing, is serving the customer. But what do we do specifically? What do we bring to the organization is ensuring that the customer has a successful experience within the company. So we're kind of the ship taking them from point A to point B, making sure they get to the right place, guiding them towards the right department that they need to get to provide their solution. So we wanted to focus less on provide service to the customer and more on what does winning look like? What does success look like for the customer, and make that our goal.
Very cool. Kevin, you have, when you started out here, and at the date of the last podcast, it was you, and we talked about it, you and Zach on the account management team. That team has grown since then as well. Talk about that kind of experience, because it's been a little more than 2 years, and there's a lot of transition that's happened in that time.
There has been a lot of change, and you're right. At the time of the first podcast, it was just me and Zach, and we were kind of splitting the load for the most part. And then we brought in Eric a little over a year ago, and we've kind of changed a little bit. I think Zach's more kind of like big picture stuff, kind of oversees everything, and then now Eric and I handle our usual day-to-day stuff. But it has been, exponential. We were, I feel like back in those days, and it's 2 years, and it's not really that long ago, but it feels like forever ago.
Yeah,
it was all we could do. We had to just work hard and bust tail, to get 30, maybe 40 quotes out a week. And now we're in the 50s, between the three of us. So we're really pushing, and it's not even that hard, to really get up to those kind of numbers. I don't want to say it's effortless, but it's certainly easier, that we have, more hands in the pot helping to pull some of that weight.
Yeah. And over the course of time, a lot of those perspectives have changed. When we talk about momentum, when we talked about goals, and we talked about how to get to those particular kind of targets that we were trying to get towards, and it required to grow the team, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the momentum process. So in episode number 1, and again, if you haven't heard it yet, I would definitely encourage you to go check it out. It made me appreciate a lot of the quality of our podcast that's improved based off of the original time frame. It's hard to comprehend it, but if you go back and either watch it or listen to it, then you'll have more of an appreciation for it, which I don't even know if the video, I guess the video on Facebook is still there. But anyway, you can check that out. Through that podcast, we talked a lot of analogies, a lot of cliches.
There was only one cliche.
There was only one.
One cliche.
Okay. Which one was it?
It was a rising tide lifts all boats.
Okay.
Just a reminder, you're listening to the Coffee Break Podcast. Also, we wanted to let you know that our team puts together a weekly blog post. You can find it at locdoc.net/blog. It's guaranteed to raise your IQ by 12 points or your money back. So it's pretty much a win-win. All right.
I feel like there was more than that.
That was just the one.
That was just one.
Just the one.
And we also talked about the fact at that point we had just wrapped up some Topgolf competition that we were working on, which was, again, it feels like a whole different world. So now we're into today. We're into 2020, and we started out January 1, December of 2019, moving into January. This was going to be our vision year. This was going to be a stretch year. This was going to be a massive growth year for us because we had momentum on our side. Like 2019 was a great push growth year for us, and now we come into 2020, and March of 2020, the brakes came on everything, or that's what it felt like. So when we talked about momentum in 2018, we were talking about it as how do we maintain where we were at that point. So marching into August at that point, and the second half of the year, we're coming down that hill. And I think one of the statements that you made was, you gave an analogy about baling hay.
Yes. So I believe, if I remember correctly, when I was younger as a side job, I helped a couple farmers near me. We baled hay.
Was his name Joe?
No, his name was not Joe.
Oh.
He was Brown, though. His last name was Brown.
So Farmer Brown. Okay.
Farmer Brown. Right. Yes. And I would help them bale up hay, and sometimes they would do squares, and sometimes we would do the big rolls. Yep. He didn't have, a lot of times you see now like the front end loaders with the spear on them, where you just pick them up and you move them around.
Seen plenty of those.
Yeah. So he didn't have one. So when he would do round ones, we had to roll them into place. And I think the analogy it's very hard to get it rolling and to kind of get that speed, get it moving. But once you get it moving, to keep it moving is not too bad. You don't have to put as much energy into it. The problem is once you get it moving, if you lose control of it, if it gets going too fast, it rolls down the hill and slams inside of somebody's truck, and they have a really bad day.
Yeah. And you definitely want that. Want that to happen. So we said, hey, how do we keep this thing on track so it doesn't go off the rails? Yes. And then one of the things that Levi talked about was a conversation about inaction is a killer of momentum. Yeah. So doing nothing is the worst thing you can do for momentum.
Yes.
Right.
What have you learned over the course of the last 2 years that you would either stick with that theory or is that changed?
I think I would maybe improve upon that idea. I do think that inaction is a killer of momentum. But I also think that it's about the kind of actions, because there are actions that take you backwards as well. So it's not just about moving, period. It's about moving forward. So inaction is one of the things. I mean, in a sense, inaction is an action because you're never not acting. I think, one of the principles of motion is it's cause and effect. That's what motion is all about. It's about when something moves, it moves forward.
Sure.
So not moving is a cause of an effect. So in a sense, you're slowing momentum or allowing something else to move rather than yourself moving forward. You could be moving backwards. I'm not trying to make it too complicated, but the idea there.
Yeah, I follow. So if you don't do anything, momentum is carrying other things forward and you're going to fall into an alternate position.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how has that played into effect over the course of 2020? If you were to think about momentum in that aspect of inaction, so say you're a business and March happened and the pandemic started, COVID-19 becomes rampant, shutdowns happening all across the country. What does inaction do in that aspect if you can't do anything? Or what does inaction look like from a business perspective or from an operations perspective where you sit?
Yeah, I think that really if you're not reacting in a way that I think one of the biggest things for us was culture.
Okay.
Was that again, like what is your foundation? What are you based on? Like what? Instead of foundation, I'll say this because we're talking about motion. What is your propulsion? What is propelling you forward? Right. So if it was if it was money, right? If money's the only thing pushing you forward, well then COVID hits, your money falls back, and then you know. But for us, I think it's about what is moving you forward, and if you're acting on that, if you're acting on the culture. Like our culture is our core values, consistent communication, courageous honesty. Those are the things that we couldn't do nothing about.
Sure.
We had to do something about it. So COVID hits, we all get together and say, okay, this is a time when these core values are challenging to implement. So in order to survive, we have to act. How do we do it? Let's do it and let's make a plan and then let's stick to that plan. And it almost has to be, last time we talked about, little steps, one by one. And it's easy when everything's great, when you're prosperous and successful to make big steps and you're like, yeah, let's do this. We're good. But really when it gets hard is when you have to make those little steps. You can't take a big step and then risk falling back, but you have to just say, okay, one of the things, as an example, is when we started meeting every single day in our leadership huddles to discuss, and we started meeting with each team. Each team met every day to discuss, okay, what's the plan for today? What's our priority for today? What's my takeaway for this meeting? Those types of things happening every single day were very small things, but what they did was they allowed us to continue to attach ourselves to what was propelling us forward, which was our culture, rather than attaching ourselves to anything that might be negative, that COVID is causing it all to fall back. And I think that is a huge part of what has helped us. Not that we haven't been affected by it, not that we've been like, everything's been great, but the things that we've been attached to, we have been successful at what we've been attempting because of what is propelling us forward.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Coffee Break Podcast. If this information has been helpful to you, or you just really kind of like our theme song, can you help us out by rating us on whatever app you're using? And if you get really fancy, how about sharing a screenshot on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn? Okay, enough of all this. Let's get back to the conversation.
Okay, so I want to break that down because you said a lot there.
Yeah.
Small actions can keep motion happening, right?
Yes.
So if you're talking about momentum, if you're talking about continuing to move forward, small steps are a big component of that. You can take big steps to improve that momentum. Maybe you're rolling that hay bale. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Hay bale at a faster pace. But what gets it started? Small, consistent steps.
Yep.
Not a massive push. Small, consistent steps are going to get that moving forward.
Yep.
And that was something that we had to change, and it wasn't like, I guess it was a big change. It didn't feel like a massive change, but just a level of communication. Instead of now let's looking at a month, let's look at a day. Let's focus on what's happening today. Can we do that with excellence?
And I think that a lot of that was born out of just the situation, because the way it seems like things were just changing on a day-to-day basis. You never really knew what was kind of coming down the line. So I think the daily aspect of it was kind of born out of necessity, because you really had no idea what your customers were doing, what the governor was doing, what was kind of happening around you was a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So, you kind of had to plan for it.
It's interesting that when you refer to momentum in the business world, that it points back to kind of that time frame where early on we all sat down as a leadership team and said, hey, what is the plan and game plan going to be for this? And then devise that plan. And now let's communicate that out to everybody so that we can stay consistent on that. And we talked about it every week, every time we all got together collectively as an organization, virtually at that point. We were going back. This is our plan. This is our goal. This is what we're focused on. This is how we're going to stay solvent. Yep. And it's part of those small steps to continue to move forward. So I guess the question is, momentum at this point, how is it different than in 2018? How is it different than through the process of 2019?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, okay. Well, just as kind of a pure comparison, when we sat down and talked about momentum in 2018, we were coming off our first big school project down in South Carolina, which at the time we were like, this is huge. How are we going to get it done? And we got it done. And then that momentum carried forward. And then in 2019, the same scope of work that we had just finished basically tripled. So now the ball is really, really rolling, and it's moving at a really, really big clip. And to also, one thing we talked about in that episode was the slingshot, the stretch, and being able to propel yourself forward. And I remember, 2019, that summer was a stretch because we had 2 teams on 2 different ends of South Carolina, and we had only a handful of people here in town, covering service, and it was, for us, it was a huge stretch. And there was a lot of driving. I don't know how many times I've been to Anderson and Charleston, but boy, I tell you, I was burning the road up. Yeah. And Mike doing the same thing and just having guys travel back and forth. It's a huge stretch. But then, fast forward after the stretch, it just rocketed us, forward. Not from a fiduciary standpoint, but as in I'm going to throw some big words in there for you. I've been reading the dictionary. Nice. So, not from a monetary stance, I'll dumb it down a little bit. But from a team stance, I think, and realistically, I think that was the first real, 2018's project was big, but I feel like 2019 was a true test of what OMS could do and our system and how it was built and our process. And, how do we dedicate this much effort and keep it all in control? And I think there was a lot of tough points, but we learned a lot and we grew a lot. And then, you look again now, 2020, obviously the scope wasn't as big because we weren't working in 2 different parts of the state, but we still had a large chunk to do and it went well. I joke about it, but it's 100% true. The first one we did in 2018, I literally stumbled into it by accident because I had left a lot of stuff off, and they're like, "Ha, this guy, let's give him a PO. He says he can do it." So I did. We stumbled into it purely by accident, and then I learned a lot of things. Yeah. And then 2019 rolls around. I fixed those issues. We went through another round, learned a lot of things, and then 2020. It was improved again. Yeah. And I feel like every year, you talk about momentum, not only in, growing, fiscally or through your team, but it's also gaining momentum in your process because as we've gone down the line, it's gotten more accurate, more streamlined. We've become way more efficient. So.
Yeah. And to add something to what he just said, I think one of the big changes from 2018 to 2020 is not just that we have gained more momentum, but that we have visibility of our momentum. Is that a big question that has come about is that how do we see the momentum? How do we see where we're at? And what are the tiny little things that are pushing us back, and how do we correct those quickly? So meeting every day, we began building scoreboards, and we have the winning formula we've been doing. And over time, we've improved our ability. So now we can see the lead measures, the things that contribute to success that we can easily change, that we can easily correct for. Okay, here's where we're at with this. And we're still correcting that. We're still making it. So to his point of the more accurate, we were able to see as we're going up. It's 2018 to me. It's kind of like, yeah, we're succeeding. And I know that it's because of what our culture. But if you were to say, okay, well, tell me a specific thing you guys have been doing, I can maybe point out one or two things. Okay, what's the relationship? I don't know. We're just doing it, right? Yeah. But now I can say, okay, here's where we're at. These are the specific steps we took. This is where we're at now. So we can actually see, hey, here are the things we did, and now we're a little worse off in this area. Now we can quickly correct it and continue building the momentum.
I want you to think about an example of that, because I think you're spot on with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I want to get an example from you, practical, like literal information. While he's doing that, Kevin, here's my question for you. Going back to the momentum and the actions and the steps and the activities that get you to there. Mm-hmm. You get 100% of every quote that you put out. Every estimate that you put out, you always get 100% approval.
No.
Mm-hmm. So what is your typical percentage of approvals?
Somewhere between 30 and 40%.
Okay. So for 100 quotes that you send out, you're only going to get approval on between 30 and 40.
Yep.
So what is the momentum process? How has that changed for us? Because we've had in that process of sending out estimates, we've learned a lot. What have we learned through that process as it applies to momentum?
Sure. And
just even percentages of approvals.
Right. So I think the biggest thing, that's really changed or evolved and we've really gained momentum at is like I said before, when it was just Zach and I, it was a real push to get 40 out a week. Now with Eric, we can easily hit the 50s, and it's not a problem. The one thing I have noticed is that we're taking more shots, but the approval rate kind of stays. It's maybe improved a little bit based on percentages. Mm-hmm. Yes, we're sending out more, but it's somewhere around the same. I think the major takeaway from that is it's important to take as many shots as you can. And a wise man once told me that you miss every shot you don't take.
Yeah.
I believe 3 people actually said that, but I digress.
The last one is the most important.
Right. Zach, it's on the wall. He's the most prominent purveyor of that particular cliche. But it's about taking quality shots. And I think that's one thing we've learned is we can just sit here all day and just churn out. And I mean, we could really bump the numbers up and just throw numbers at everything.
Yep.
It's not necessarily going to improve anything. The most important thing is just making sure that we're taking time for each one and making sure we're solving the problem. We're giving good customer service, making sure that they get what they need. And at the end of the day, if they decide to go with us, great. Mm-hmm. If they don't, it's kind of one of those things.
But you've learned the whole process, and it's really been applicable that the more of those steps that you take, the more of those opportunities that you put out there, the percentage is going to stay the same, but the ultimate end goal increases.
Correct.
So from your perspective, you just said that previously it was hard to measure or point to exactly what caused the momentum. How has that changed on a specific standpoint?
I'll use one specific example that has affected our department the most is right when COVID hit, we started having our meetings every day as a leadership huddle. And you started asking me, to keep track of how many calls are coming in and how many site visits are we putting. which means how many people are calling us, and then how many people are actually requesting work.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that was something, if you had asked me before, I might have even just made up a number off the top of my head, probably just based on how I felt. I could have had 5 really hard calls and I was like, yeah, I was slammed all day, it was horrible. And you're like, it really wasn't that bad. Or
that's because 80% of statistics are made up on the spot.
Exactly.
Including that one.
That's true. So the whole idea was that it was all based on what was in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things you always said is, well, what's the numbers say? Like, let's look at the numbers. And now it's every week we see, oh, hey, calls are starting to pick up. Actually, site visits are starting to pick up. So, we can expect this and this and this to happen. So let's be ready.
Mm-hmm.
So we had time periods, especially at the beginning, when calls were way down, but we immediately knew, because we were checking every day, calls are coming up, calls are coming up, calls are coming. Now we're almost back where we were before.
Well, that was part 1 of a 2-part conversation with Kevan Starr and Levi Gray. We talked a lot longer than we anticipated. Well, maybe we did anticipate we were going to be talking that long when we get all 3 of us at a table together. You never know how long that's going to go. But it was exciting to chat with those guys today. And we're going to be bringing you part 2 next week. So make sure you tune in for that on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. If this is your first time watching or listening, hey, we've got, as we talked about in this episode, well over 100 other episodes floating out there for you to check out. You can find them all at Loc-Doc.net/podcast. They're there for you in video and audio form. You can subscribe because a new episode is coming out every Tuesday at 9 a.m. So be sure you check that out, and we'll see you next week.